The morning sun hanging over the Upper East Side of Manhattan didn't just shine. It seemed to gild the city in a layer of pale, exclusionary gold, specifically reserved for those who could afford to enjoy it. Here, the air felt different, crisper, cleaner, filtered through the ancient elms of Central Park and scented with the faint, expensive aroma of roasted artisanal coffee and old money. On Fifth Avenue, the light hit the limestone facades and copper domes of the pre-war buildings with a brilliance that blinded the tourists but merely warmed the residents. In the center of this world of manicured hedges and doormen in white gloves stood St. Augustine Prep. It was more than a school. It was an institution, a fortress of privilege masquerading as a place of learning. With its Gothic revival architecture, soaring bell towers adorned with gargoyles, and heavy wrought iron gates that looked strong enough to withstand a siege, St. Augustine was the gatekeeper for the American elite. Tuition for a single academic year here could easily purchase a spacious four-bedroom home in the Midwest. At St. Augustine, wealth was not measured, it was assumed. Students didn't discuss which colleges they might get into. They discussed how many millions their families were donating to Yale or Harvard to ensure a library was named after them. At precisely 8:15 a.m., the daily ritual began. The street in front of the imposing Gothic archway transformed into a runway for the finest automotive engineering on the planet. There were no yellow school buses here. Instead, a parade of Rolls-Royce Phantoms with privacy curtains, long wheelbase Range Rovers with diplomatic plates, and sleek Mercedes G-Wagons idled in a low, purring line. The sound of closing car doors was a heavy, expensive thud, the sound of safety, of power, of separation from the rest of the world. A sleek, obsidian black Bentley Continental GT pulled up to the curb, demanding space with its sheer presence. It shone under the autumn sun like a black pearl. The license plate was custom, a subtle nod to exclusivity. The chauffeur, Charles, a man in an immaculate uniform and white driving gloves, stepped out, circling the vehicle to open the rear door with a practiced reverence honed over decades of serving the demanding nouveau riche. Out stepped Jessica van der Woodsen. If St. Augustine was a kingdom, Jessica was its undisputed queen bee, the apex predator of the high school ecosystem. She possessed a beauty that was undeniable, yet entirely manufactured by capital. Skin made luminous by $1,000 weekly facials, blonde hair highlighted by the most expensive colorists on Madison Avenue, and teeth as white and straight as piano keys. Although the school had a strict uniform policy, Jessica treated the dress code as a mere suggestion, a canvas for her to manipulate. Her navy blue blazer was not the boxy standard issue. It had been tailored by an Italian seamstress to hug her waist perfectly. The pleated skirt, mandated to fall to the knee, was hemmed exactly 3 inches shorter than regulation, designed to showcase legs clad in imported silk stockings. On her wrist, a diamond-encrusted Cartier love bracelet caught the sunlight, flashing aggressively. But the centerpiece of her ensemble was hooked over her forearm, a Himalayan Birkin bag made of Niloticus crocodile skin, an accessory so rare that even wealthy women spent years on waiting lists just for the privilege of refusing one. "Thanks, Charles. Pick me up at 3 o'clock and bring the matcha latte from the usual place. Don't buy that almond milk trash like yesterday," Jessica said dismissively, not bothering to look at the man who drove her. Her eyes were already glued to the screen of her latest iPhone. "Yes, Miss Jessica," Charles murmured, bowing his head slightly before closing the door. Jessica ascended the stone steps, her designer Gucci loafers clicking against the pavement with a rhythmic, arrogant beat. Click, click, click. Immediately, the sea of students parted. It was like watching the Red Sea part for Moses. Conversation stopped, heads turned, eyes filled with a mixture of admiration, envy, and terrified respect followed her every move. At St. Augustine, a greeting from Jessica was a knighthood, Being ignored by her was social death. Her two lieutenants, Chloe and Madison, materialized at her side instantly, forming an impenetrable triangle of popularity. "Oh my God, Jessica!" Chloe shrieked, her voice pitching high in performative awe, a hand covering her mouth. "That bag, don't tell me your dad actually got it? That's the limited edition. I heard Victoria Beckham only has one." Jessica flipped her hair over her shoulder, a small, smug smile playing on her lips. "Oh, this old thing?" she said, feigning nonchalance. "It was a sorry gift from Daddy. He dragged me to this excruciatingly boring dinner with his real estate partners last week. I was going to leave it in the closet because the color is a bit pale, but I thought it matched the weather today." "You are literally the moment," Madison sighed, staring at the bag which cost more than a studio apartment in Brooklyn. "No one in this school has your style. Look at the freshmen. They're looking at you like you're a deity." Jessica inhaled the praise like oxygen. Her father, Piers van der Woodsen, a cutthroat real estate developer known for his flashy lifestyle and aggressive takeovers, had taught her one lesson above all others. Perception is reality. If you look like you own the world, eventually people will just give it to you. While the front entrance was a theatre of wealth, the rear entrance of St. Augustine, located near the cafeteria loading docks and the janitorial supply rooms, told a different story. It was here, amidst the smell of damp brick and exhaust, that a rusted, squeaking chain announced the arrival of Emily Harrington. Emily was the antithesis of everything happening at the front gate. She didn't arrive in a climate-controlled luxury vehicle. She arrived out of breath, her cheeks flushed pink from the 3-mile ride from her apartment. Her vehicle of choice was a second-hand Schwinn bicycle that had seen better days in the late 90s. The paint was chipping, revealing the steel frame beneath, and the front basket was slightly crushed. She hopped off, securing it to the rack with a heavy utilitarian chain. Emily's appearance was a source of constant whispers among the student body. She wore the school skirt, yes, but it was hidden beneath a grey, oversized hoodie that looked like it had been washed 1,000 times. The cuffs were fraying. Her shoes were not Italian leather loafers, but scuffed white canvas sneakers that had turned a dull grey from the city dust. On her back hung a backpack held together by a safety pin. To the students of St. Augustine, Emily was the charity case. She was the scholarship kid, the statistical anomaly allowed in to boost the school's diversity quota. They looked at her and saw poverty, struggle, and someone who didn't belong in their gilded cage. They were wrong. What nobody knew, what nobody could even conceive, was that the name Harrington on her student ID wasn't just a common surname. It was the Harrington. Emily was the sole heiress to Harrington Global Corp, a financial empire that had shaped the American economy for 4 generations. Her family didn't just have money, they had history. They had libraries named after them at Ivy League universities, wings at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and a seat at the table with presidents. Her grandfather, the patriarch of the family, was a man whose whisper could cause the stock market to crash. But unlike Jessica's father, who flaunted his new wealth with loud cars and logos, the Harringtons believed in quiet luxury, or, in Emily's case, absolute anonymity. Her grandfather had insisted on this social experiment. To lead the empire, he had told her, you must understand the people who build it, not just the people who spend it. You must know who your true friends are before the weight of your inheritance blinds you. And so, Emily lived a double life. She lived in a modest apartment with a guardian, lived on a strict allowance, and attended St. Augustine not as a princess, but as a pauper. Emily took a deep breath, steeling herself for the day. She adjusted her thick-rimmed glasses and pulled her backpack onto her shoulder. She loved learning. She was brilliant at mathematics and macroeconomics, but the social hierarchy of St. Augustine was exhausting. She kept her head down, walking around the building toward the main courtyard, hoping to slip into the library unnoticed before the first bell rang. She almost made it. Oh, my God. The voice cut through the morning air like a jagged knife. It was a voice Emily knew too well. Jessica Vander Woodson had spotted her. Jessica was standing at the top of the stone steps, looking down at the courtyard like a queen surveying a peasant revolt. Her eyes locked onto Emily, and a cruel, amused smile curled her lips. She didn't just see a classmate, she saw a target, a way to reinforce her dominance. "Look, everyone," Jessica announced, her voice projected perfectly so that dozens of students turned to look. "The circus has arrived." Jessica descended the stairs, her entourage trailing behind her. She walked straight toward Emily, invading her personal space. The scent of Jessica's perfume, something heavy with jasmine and vanilla, was overpowering. "I didn't know they let delivery girls on campus during school hours," Jessica sneered, looking Emily up and down with exaggerated disgust. She pointed a manicured finger at Emily's hoodie. "What is that? Did you rob a homeless shelter on your way here? Or is that actually considered clothing where you come from?" The crowd around them snickered. It was a nervous, obedient laughter. No one wanted to be on Jessica's bad side, so they joined in the mockery of the designated victim. Emily adjusted her grip on her backpack straps, her expression calm. She didn't flinch. Inside, she was calculating the net worth of Jessica's father's company compared to the interest her own trust fund accrued in a single hour. The math was comforting. Patience, she told herself. Just get to class. "Good morning, Jessica," Emily said, her voice steady and quiet. "I'm just trying to get to homeroom. Excuse me." She tried to step around Jessica, but the queen bee sidestepped, blocking her path. Jessica wasn't done playing with her food. "I'm serious, Emily," Jessica said, her voice dropping to a faux whisper that was meant to be heard by everyone. "I'm genuinely concerned for the school's hygiene. You rode a bicycle here? Like, physically pedaled?" She wrinkled her nose as if she smelled something foul. "You're sweating. It's disgusting. Do you not have running water at home? Or did your parents get the utilities cut off again?" "My utilities are fine, Jessica," Emily replied, clutching the strap of her fraying backpack. "I ride a bike because I like the exercise. Not everyone needs to be chauffeured 3 blocks." The retort was mild, but Jessica's eyes narrowed dangerously. She didn't like it when the mouse talked back. "Oh, listen to her," Jessica laughed, turning to Chloe and Madison. "She likes the exercise. That's adorable. That's exactly what poor people say when they can't afford an Uber." Jessica stepped closer, looming over Emily. She reached out and flicked the frayed strap of Emily's backpack with a look of utter revulsion, as if touching it might infect her. "Let's be real, scholarship." Jessica spat the nickname like a curse word. "You don't belong here. Look around." She gestured grandly to the courtyard filled with cashmere coats, limited edition sneakers, and heirs to fortunes. "This is St. Augustine. We are the future leaders of the world. You're just a clerical error in the admissions office." "I scored in the 99th percentile on the entrance exams," Emily said, her tone level. "I belong here because I earned it." Jessica threw her head back and laughed, a cold, harsh sound that echoed off the stone walls. "Earned it? Honey, nobody cares about your little test scores. In the real world, connections matter, money matters, pedigree matters. You're practically invisible. I bet you buy your clothes at Goodwill." She leaned in close, her voice dripping with venom. "St. Augustine really needs to review their standards. Allowing someone like you to walk these halls? It devalues the brand. You're bringing down the property value just by standing here." The crowd laughed louder this time. Jessica, emboldened by the audience, smirked triumphantly. "Do us all a favor," Jessica said, checking her reflection in her freshly manicured nails. "Try not to touch anything today. I don't want whatever poverty disease you have rubbing off on my Birkin. It's worth more than your entire life." With a final dismissive hair flip, Jessica spun on her heel and marched toward the school doors, her minions scrambling to follow like ducklings. The crowd dispersed, leaving Emily standing alone in the middle of the courtyard. Emily watched Jessica go. She felt a sting of humiliation, not because the insults were true, but because of the sheer cruelty behind them. She looked down at her worn-out sneakers and then up at the towering limestone building of the school. A small, ironic smile touched her lips. "If only you knew, Jessica," Emily thought to herself as she gripped the straps of her backpack. "Your father is currently begging my grandfather's bank for a loan extension to keep his empire from collapsing. That bag on your arm? My family owns the holding company that owns the brand." October swept through the Upper East Side with a crisp, biting chill, turning the leaves of Central Park into a burning tapestry of russet, amber, and gold. At St. Augustine Prep, the change in season signaled a shift in the social tectonic plates. Academics were momentarily relegated to the background. It was football season. The hallways, usually a runway for haute couture, were now dominated by the varsity Letterman jackets, navy blue wool with gold leather sleeves. These jackets were not merely clothing, they were armor, status symbols that declared the wearer to be untouchable. And at the apex of this hierarchy, wearing the number 12 on his back, was Alex Miller. Alex was the quarterback, the golden boy of St. Augustine. With his tousled sandy blonde hair, jawline that could cut glass, and a father who owned a controlling stake in a major Silicon Valley tech firm, Alex was the prize every girl had been trained to hunt. He was the sun around which the school's social planets orbited. Jessica van der Woodsen, naturally, considered herself the moon, destined to be by his side. But Alex Miller was bored. He was exhausted by the endless cycle of vapid conversations. Dates with girls like Jessica felt like business mergers. They talked about who was summering in the Hamptons, who had the best table at Nobu, and which plastic surgeon did the best rhinoplasty. There was no substance, no spark, no life. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, seeking refuge from the fawning adoration of the cheerleading squad, Alex ducked into the library. He navigated past the main study hall, where students were more interested in gossiping than studying, and found his way to the back archives. A dusty, silent section filled with floor-to-ceiling mahogany bookshelves. There, sitting at a scratched wooden table near a stained glass window, was Emily. She wasn't on her phone. She wasn't fixing her makeup. She was hunched over a stack of books that looked heavy enough to crush a small animal. Alex squinted at the title of the open tome, The Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith, alongside a modern critique of Keynesian economic theory. Intrigued, Alex approached. "Light reading for a Tuesday?" he joked, his voice echoing slightly in the quiet stacks. Emily jumped slightly, adjusting her oversized, thick-rimmed glasses. When she looked up and saw the school's most popular boy standing there, she didn't swoon. She didn't blush or stammer. She simply marked her page with a slip of paper. "It's research," she said, her voice calm and devoid of the usual high-pitched flirtation he was used to. "I'm trying to understand the correlation between inherited wealth and the decline of innovation in the 21st century. It seemed relevant to the current environment." Alex blinked, surprised. A genuine smile, one that didn't reach the tabloids, spread across his face. "That sounds like a direct shot at half the student body." "If the shoe fits," Emily shrugged, turning back to her book. Alex didn't leave. Instead, he pulled out a chair and sat down. "Explain it to me," he challenged softly. "The decline of innovation." For the next hour, the quarterback and the scholarship girl didn't talk about the upcoming game against Trinity. They debated market volatility, game theory, and the ethics of corporate bailouts. Alex was stunned. Beneath the frayed hoodie and the quiet demeanor, Emily possessed a mind like a steel trap, sharp, brilliant, and utterly fearless. She didn't treat him like a celebrity. She treated him like an intellectual equal. For the first time in years, Alex felt seen, not for his jersey or his bank account, but for his brain. The dynamic of the school began to fracture. In the days that followed, the unthinkable happened. Alex stopped sitting at the royal table in the center of the cafeteria, the table reserved for the elite, presided over by Jessica. Instead, he was seen carrying his tray to the quiet corner near the window, sitting opposite Emily. The sight sent shockwaves through the student body. Whispers hissed through the corridors like steam escaping a pipe. Why is Alex Miller sitting with the charity case? Is he lost? Maybe he lost a bet. Jessica van der Woodsen watched this unfold with a mixture of disbelief and blind rage. From her vantage point, she saw Alex laughing, actually laughing at something Emily said. She saw him offer Emily his apple. She saw the way he looked at her, with a focus and intensity he had never shown Jessica. "This is unacceptable," Jessica snapped, gripping her fork so hard her knuckles turned white. "She's bewitched him. Look at her. She looks like she got dressed in the dark at a thrift store." Chloe, sitting to her right, added fuel to the fire. "It's embarrassing, Jess. If Alex dates her, it makes us all look bad. The hierarchy exists for a reason." Jessica narrowed her eyes, her mind working like a viper coiling to strike. She thinks she can just waltz in here with her poverty and steal my life? She wants attention? Fine, I'll give her attention. If Emily wanted to play in the big leagues, Jessica decided, she was about to learn that it was a contact sport. The campaign began on Wednesday. It started digitally. St. Augustine had an unofficial, anonymous social media ecosystem, Instagram pages and TikTok accounts dedicated to gossip. Jessica, using a burner account, posted the first blind item. Which scholarship student is actually a con artist? Word on the street is her mom waits tables in the Bronx, and she's trying to trap a rich boyfriend to pay off the family gambling debts. Watch your wallets, boys. The desperate ones are the most dangerous. Within hours, the rumor had mutated and spread like a virus. By Thursday morning, everyone knew that Emily was a gold digger. They knew she lived in a squalid apartment. They knew she was using Alex. Emily walked down the hallway, her head down, clutching her books to her chest. The atmosphere was suffocating. Eyes followed her everywhere. "Hey, can I get a refill?" A boy from the lacrosse team sneered as she passed, holding out his empty water bottle. His friends erupted in laughter. "Check your pockets," a girl whispered loudly to her friend. "The Bronx burglar is walking by." Emily bit her lip, her heart pounding against her ribs. She wanted to scream. She wanted to tell them that her mother was a renowned philanthropist who sat on the board of the Metropolitan Opera, and that she waited tables only at charity galas she hosted. She wanted to tell them that her gambling debts were non-existent, and her trust fund generated more interest in a day than their parents earned in a month. But she couldn't. Not yet. Her grandfather's lesson echoed in her mind. Character is revealed in the fire. Hold the line, Emily. Alex tried to defend her, shutting down the guys in the locker room, but he couldn't stop the whispers. The tension built until Friday, pizza day in the cafeteria, the busiest, loudest, most chaotic lunch hour of the week. The cafeteria was a cacophony of shouting, clattering trays, and the smell of pepperoni and grease. Emily had grabbed a quick lunch, a bowl of tomato soup and a carton of milk, and was heading toward the tray return, hoping to escape to the library early. To get to the exit, she had to pass Jessica's table. Jessica saw her coming. She saw the tired set of Emily's shoulders, the way she kept her eyes on the floor. It wasn't enough. Jessica wanted total destruction. She wanted to break Emily so thoroughly that she would leave St. Augustine and never look back. As Emily stepped parallel to the table, Jessica looked at Chloe and winked. Then, with the precision of a dancer, she shot her leg out into the aisle. It happened in agonizing slow motion. Emily's sneaker caught on Jessica's designer boot. She stumbled forward, her hands flailing instinctively to break her fall. The tray left her grip. Crash! Emily hit the linoleum hard, her knees skidding painfully. But the sound of her body hitting the floor was drowned out by the wet explosion of the food. The bowl of hot tomato soup launched into the air and came down directly on Emily's chest, splashing up onto her face and soaking into the grey fabric of her hoodie. The carton of milk burst open, creating a white puddle that mixed with the red soup, surrounding her in a grotesque, colourful mess. The entire cafeteria went dead silent. 300 conversations stopped instantly. Emily gasped, the heat of the soup stinging her skin through the wet clothes. She lay there for a second, stunned, blinking tomato soup out of her eyelashes. The smell was overpowering. Acidic tomatoes and old milk. Oops! Jessica's voice rang out, bright, loud, and sickeningly fake. She stood up, covering her mouth with a manicured hand, her eyes widening in mock surprise. "Oh my God, I am so sorry," Jessica exclaimed, playing to the crowd. "My foot just slipped. I didn't see you there down so low." She took a step closer, looking down at Emily, sprawled in the filth. Her expression shifted from mock surprise to cold, hard malice. "But honestly, Emily," she sneered, her voice dropping just enough to sound intimate, but loud enough for the tables nearby to hear. "Look at the bright side. That outfit was hideous anyway. It was basically a rag. Consider this a favor. Now you have a legitimate excuse to go to a laundromat. If you can even afford the quarters." A ripple of laughter started at Jessica's table and spread outward. It was the cruel, nervous laughter of a mob that was glad they weren't the victim. Emily felt the heat rise in her cheeks, hotter than the soup. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes. Tears of shock, tears of humiliation. Her instinct was to curl into a ball. Her instinct was to run away and never return. "No," a voice inside her whispered. It was the voice of the Harrington bloodline. Harringtons do not run. We conquer. She took a shaking breath. She placed her hands on the slippery floor and pushed herself up. She ignored the sticky sensation of the milk on her jeans. She ignored the soup dripping from her chin. She stood up to her full height. She was shorter than Jessica, but in that moment she seemed 10 feet tall. Emily reached over to a nearby table, grabbed a stack of napkins, and methodically began to wipe the soup from her face. She didn't rush. She didn't look frantic. Her movements were deliberate, calm, terrifyingly composed. When she was done, she crumpled the dirty napkins and dropped them onto Jessica's pristine lunch tray. Then she looked up. Her blue eyes, usually soft and behind glasses, were now blazing with a cold blue fire. She locked eyes with Jessica, refusing to blink. The laughter died down. The room grew uncomfortable. Everyone was waiting for the breakdown, for the crying fit. It didn't come. "You think this makes you powerful, Jessica?" Emily asked. Her voice wasn't loud, but in the silence of the cafeteria, it carried to every corner. It was steady, devoid of the tremor of fear. Jessica crossed her arms, trying to maintain her dominance. "I think it makes you dirty, and frankly, you smell like you belong in a garbage chute." Emily took a step closer, invading Jessica's personal bubble. She didn't care about the mess. She stared straight into the soul of the bully. "My clothes may be cheap," Emily said, each word enunciated with crystal clarity. "I can wash this hoodie. I can buy a new one for $10. Soap and water will fix this in an hour." She tilted her head slightly, her gaze sweeping over Jessica's expensive hair, her expensive makeup, her expensive soul. But you, Emily continued, her voice dropping to a lethal, icy register, you are cruel, you are insecure, and you are hollow. This soup will wash off, Jessica. Emily delivered the final blow, her voice cutting through the air like a guillotine. But a cheap personality? No amount of Chanel number. 5 can cover that stench. For a heartbeat, time stood still. Jessica's mouth fell open, her retort dying in her throat. She had expected a victim. She had found a warrior. Emily held her gaze for 1 second longer, asserting her dominance, before turning on her heel. She walked out of the cafeteria, head held high, covered in soup but wearing her dignity like a royal cape. She left Jessica standing there, spotless in her designer clothes, yet looking utterly, completely small. December descended upon Manhattan like a diamond-dusted blanket. The city transformed into a glittering wonderland. The Rockefeller tree was lit, the window displays on Fifth Avenue were unveiled, and the air smelled of roasted chestnuts and expensive perfume. But for the students of St. Augustine Prep, the holiday season meant only one thing: the Winter Gala. Held annually in the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel, the gala was not merely a school dance, it was a high-stakes social summit. It was a fundraising event where tickets cost $5,000 a plate, attended by parents, alumni, and the city's elite. For the girls of St. Augustine, it was a battlefield where the weapon of choice was a designer gown. The tension in the hallways was palpable. Who was wearing whom? Who was taking whom? 3 days before the event, the hierarchy of the school was shattered. Alex Miller, the golden boy, was seen leaning against the lockers near the AP Economics classroom. He looked nervous, a rare expression for a star quarterback. When Emily emerged, clutching her worn-out textbooks, Alex didn't just say hello. He asked her to be his date. "I know this isn't really your world," Alex said, rubbing the back of his neck. "The cameras, the press, the pretension, it's a lot, but I don't want to go with anyone else. I want to go with you." Emily, surprised and blushing beneath her glasses, said yes. The news hit Jessica van der Woodsen like a physical blow. She had already bought a gold Marchesa gown, anticipating that Alex would inevitably ask her. To be passed over for the charity case was an insult she could not abide. "She's going to ruin the aesthetic of the entire evening," Jessica ranted to her minions in the bathroom, reapplying her lip gloss with aggressive strokes. "Can you imagine? She'll probably show up in something from a department store clearance rack. It's disrespectful to the plaza." But Emily had a plan. She knew she couldn't reveal her true identity yet, but she also refused to embarrass Alex. She couldn't show up looking like a pauper, but she couldn't buy a dress in New York without risking being recognized by the sales associates at Bergdorf's or Saks. She made a secure call to Paris. "Grandmère," Emily spoke in flawless French, "I need a favor. I need the ghost." 2 days later, a plain, nondescript box arrived at the school's front office, addressed to Emily. Inside was a dress that money couldn't buy. A custom Christian Dior haute couture gown, commissioned by her grandmother years ago but never worn. It was made of white silk so fine it felt like water, hand-stitched by the legendary petites mains of Paris. It had no labels, no logos, just pure, unadulterated luxury. Emily didn't want to take the dress back to her cramped, fake apartment for fear of damaging it, so she carefully hung it in her tall locker in the drama department's changing room, planning to change there after her final study hall. This was her fatal mistake. Jessica had eyes everywhere. A freshman, eager to curry favor with the queen bee, tipped Jessica off about the box Emily had carried into the locker room. Thursday afternoon. The school was quiet. Jessica, accompanied by Chloe and Madison, slipped into the drama department. Jessica pulled a small tool from her pocket, a master key she had swiped from the janitor's office months ago. "Let's see what the street rat thinks passes for fashion." Jessica sneered, unlocking Emily's locker. The door swung open. The girls gasped. Hanging there was the white silk gown. Even in the dim light of the locker room, it shimmered with an ethereal glow. It was simple, architectural, and breathtakingly beautiful. Chloe reached out to touch it. Wow. Jess, this fabric, it's incredible. There's no tag. Is it custom? Jessica's face twisted in jealousy. She recognized quality when she saw it, and this dress made her gold sequined gown look like a Halloween costume. But she couldn't admit that. No tag? Jessica scoffed, masking her envy with disdain. It's probably some knockoff she stitched together from old curtains. It's pathetic. She thinks she can wear a white sheet to the plaza? Jessica reached into her designer purse and pulled out a bottle of nail polish. The color was vampire red, a dark, blood-like crimson. She wants to stand out? Jessica uncapped the bottle, the sharp smell of acetone filling the small room. Let's help her. White is so boring. Let's give it a splash of color. Jess, wait, isn't that too far? Madison asked nervously. Shut up, Jessica snapped. With a cruel, deliberate motion, Jessica poured the thick red lacquer over the bodice of the white silk. The polish oozed down the fabric, soaking into the delicate fibers, looking like a fresh, jagged wound. Not content with just the stain, Jessica took a pair of shears from the costume table and slashed the hem of the skirt, turning the masterpiece into rags. Oops, she giggled, tossing the empty bottle into the bottom of the locker. Fashion emergency. Come on, let's go. 2 hours later, Emily entered the locker room, her heart light with anticipation. She opened the locker. Her breath hitched in her throat. She stood frozen, staring at the carnage. The dress was destroyed. The red polish had hardened into a crusty, violent stain against the pure white silk. The skirt was shredded. It wasn't just a ruined dress. It felt like a physical assault. Emily's knees gave way, and she sank onto the bench. Tears welled up in her eyes, hot, stinging tears of frustration. She checked her phone. A text from Alex. I'm at the plaza. The press is already here. Can't wait to see you. She couldn't go. She had nothing to wear. If she showed up in her school uniform or her street clothes, she would be the laughingstock of New York. Jessica had won. Emily reached for her phone to text Alex and cancel. She was going to tell him she was sick. She was going to run home and hide. But as her thumb hovered over the screen, a notification popped up from her family's private banking app. Daily interest accrued $45,000. Emily stared at the number. Then she looked at the ruined dress. A cold, hard realization settled over her. Why am I crying? She thought. I am Emily Harrington. My family built the steel skeletons of this city. We own the mortgage on the Plaza Hotel. Why am I letting a girl whose father rents his private jet dictate my happiness? She wiped her tears. Her expression shifted from sorrow to a terrifying, icy calm. She dialed a number. Alfred? She said, her voice steady. It's Emily. Yes, plans have changed. I need you to bring the car around to the back entrance. No, not the Honda. Bring the Phantom. Of course, Miss Emily, the butler's voice crackled. And the attire? Open the vault, Emily commanded. Bring Mother's 1996 vintage Chanel collection. And Alfred, bring the sapphire parure, the heavy one. There was a pause on the line. The royal sapphires, miss? Are you sure? I am done hiding, Alfred, Emily said, staring at the ruined white dress. If they want a show, I'll give them a coronation. The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel was a vision of Gilded Age splendor. Immense crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow over the sea of tuxedos and designer gowns. Waiters in white gloves moved silently with trays of champagne. The air buzzed with the chatter of the wealthy. Jessica van der Woodsen was in her element. She looked flashy in her gold dress, clutching Alex's arm tightly, even though he looked distracted and miserable. "I told you, Alex," Jessica cooed, leaning into him as a photographer snapped their picture. "She's not coming. She probably realized she doesn't fit in. It's for the best. You don't want to be seen with someone who lacks breeding." Alex checked his watch for the 20th time. "She said she was coming. Maybe traffic is bad." "Traffic?" Jessica laughed, sipping her sparkling cider. "Or maybe she's just embarrassed. Face it, Alex. You tried to save a stray puppy, but puppies don't belong at the plaza." Suddenly, the heavy oak doors at the top of the grand staircase swung open. It wasn't announced. There was no fanfare. But the energy in the room shifted instantly. The chatter died down, starting near the stairs and rippling outward until the entire ballroom fell into a stunned silence. Even the string quartet faltered and stopped playing. "What is everyone looking at?" Jessica snapped, turning around. Then she saw her. Standing at the top of the marble staircase was Emily. But it wasn't the girl in the oversized hoodie. She was wearing a vintage Chanel gown from the 1990s archival collection, a strapless column of black velvet that absorbed the light, hugging her figure with a devastatingly elegant silhouette. The dress was dramatic, featuring a plunging back and a train that pooled like liquid night around her feet. But it was the jewelry that made the room gasp. Around her neck sat the Harrington sapphires, a necklace of massive cushion-cut cashmere sapphires surrounded by halos of flawless diamonds. The gems were so blue they looked like pieces of the deep ocean, glowing with an inner fire. Matching earrings dangled from her ears, catching the chandelier light and scattering blue sparks across the room. It was a set of jewelry worth more than the entire net worth of half the people in the room. Her hair was swept up in a sleek, architectural chignon. Her makeup was sharp, a classic winged eyeliner and a deep red lip. She wore no glasses. Her blue eyes were piercing, scanning the crowd with the imperious confidence of a queen surveying her subjects. "Is that Emily?" a boy near the stairs whispered, his jaw hanging open. "That dress," a mother whispered to her daughter. "That's vintage Chanel. You can't even buy that." "And the diamonds," a man muttered, adjusting his glasses. "Good Lord, those are real." Jessica stood frozen. Her grip on her glass tightened until her knuckles turned white. She felt small. She felt tacky. Her gold sequins suddenly looked cheap and garish next to Emily's timeless, dark elegance. "That's impossible," Jessica hissed, her voice trembling. "She stole it. She must have stolen it." Emily began to descend the stairs. She moved with a grace that couldn't be taught, a natural poise that commanded attention. She didn't look down. She looked straight at Alex. Alex was stunned. He stepped away from Jessica, as if drawn by a magnet. He walked to the bottom of the stairs, looking up at Emily as if she were a revelation. "Hi," Emily said softly as she reached the bottom step. "You look—" Alex struggled for words. "You look dangerous." Emily smirked. "Is that a bad thing?" "It's the best thing I've ever seen," he breathed. Emily took his arm, and then she turned her gaze to Jessica. Jessica was shaking. She marched up to Emily, trying to regain control of the narrative, trying to find a flaw. "Well, well," Jessica spat, though her voice lacked its usual venomous bite. "Did you rob a museum on your way here? Or is that costume jewelry from a theater prop room?" The circle of students around them held their breath. Emily looked at Jessica. She didn't look angry. She looked bored. She looked at Jessica the way a lion looks at a buzzing fly. "Hello, Jessica," Emily said, her voice smooth, cultured, and carrying a hint of steel. "I noticed you didn't like the white dress. You were right. It was too simple." She stepped closer, the massive sapphires at her throat glittering dangerously. "But regarding your question," Emily whispered, loud enough for the circle to hear, You really should learn to distinguish between costume jewelry and heirlooms, Jessica. It's a vital skill if you want to pretend to be elite. She glanced down at Jessica's bracelet, a popular designer bangle. For example, Emily continued, offering a pitying smile. Cartier doesn't use a claw setting for that specific bracelet. You might want to ask your father why he's buying your jewelry from Canal Street. Jessica gasped, clutching her wrist, her face flushing a deep, humiliated crimson. A ripple of snickering broke out among the crowd. "Enjoy your night, Jessica," Emily said dismissively. She turned to Alex. "I believe they're playing a waltz, shall we?" As Alex led Emily onto the dance floor, the crowd parted for them. Jessica stood alone, holding her crushed plastic cup, watching as the girl she had tried to destroy became the brightest star in the Manhattan sky. The music swelled, and Emily Harrington spun in the arms of the quarterback, her black velvet dress swirling like ink, signaling the beginning of the end for Jessica Vander Woodson. The fallout from the Winter Gala had barely settled when the next major event on the St. Augustine prep calendar arrived: the Senior Business Seminar Field Trip. This wasn't a trip to a museum or a park. This was an exclusive, highly coveted visit to the nerve center of the global economy, Harrington Tower. Located in the heart of the financial district, the Harrington Global Corp headquarters was the tallest, most imposing skyscraper in Manhattan. It was a monolith of black glass and steel that pierced the clouds, a physical manifestation of the family's dominance over Wall Street. On the luxury charter bus heading downtown, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Since the gala, where Emily had stunned everyone, the school had split into two camps: those who were fascinated by the mysterious quiet girl, and those who remained loyal to Jessica Vander Woodson out of fear. Jessica, desperate to regain her footing after being upstaged, was in rare form. She sat at the front of the bus, holding court, her voice raised loud enough for the entire bus to hear. "You guys don't understand," Jessica boasted, checking her reflection in her compact mirror. "This isn't just a tour for me. My dad is practically best friends with the CEO. He's a VIP client. I've been to the tower 1,000,000 times for private dinners." She turned in her seat, casting a venomous look toward the back of the bus, where Emily sat next to Alex. Emily was back in her civilian clothes, a plain grey sweater and jeans, though she held her head a little higher than before. "Hey, Emily!" Jessica shouted, smirking. "You might want to wait outside when we get there. The air filtration system inside is set for billionaires. We wouldn't want your poverty to contaminate the oxygen. It's a very sterile environment." Alex frowned, about to snap back, but Emily placed a calming hand on his arm. She looked out the window as the bus turned a corner, revealing the colossal black tower looming above them. "If only you knew, Jessica," Emily thought, suppressing a smile. "I approved the budget for that air filtration system myself during last summer's internship." The bus pulled up to the curb. The students disembarked, craning their necks to see the top of the building. The entrance was intimidating: massive revolving doors flanked by armed security guards, and a lobby that looked more like a cathedral than an office. The floors were Italian marble, and a massive abstract sculpture worth millions dominated the center. Waiting for them in the lobby was a sharp-looking man in a bespoke navy suit. He had silver hair and the demeanor of a shark. This was Mr. Sterling, the Chief Operating Officer, COO of Harrington Global. "Welcome to Harrington Global," Mr. Sterling said, his voice projecting authority. "I am Mr. Sterling. I will be your guide today. We have a strict schedule, as the chairman is currently in meetings." Jessica wasted no time. She pushed her way to the front of the group, flipping her hair. "Hi, Mr. Sterling," she said, extending her hand with an arrogant smile. "I'm Jessica Vander Woodson. My father is Pierce Vander Woodson, from Vander Woodson Real Estate. He told me to tell you that I was coming. I'm sure he arranged for us to meet the chairman personally." Mr. Sterling looked at her hand, then up at her face. He didn't shake it. His expression remained completely flat. "I am aware of your father, Miss Van der Woodson," Sterling said coolly. "However, the chairman's schedule is determined by global market movements, not by casual acquaintances. The chairman is busy. Please stay with the group and do not touch the artwork." Jessica's smile faltered. She pulled her hand back, her face flushing pink as snickers rippled through the class. As the group moved toward the security gates, Emily lingered at the back. As she passed the head of security, a burly man named Frank, who had known her since she was 5. Frank's eyes widened. He opened his mouth to say, "Good morning, Miss Emily." But Emily quickly pressed a finger to her lips and gave a subtle shake of her head. Frank understood immediately. He nodded imperceptibly and let her pass as just another student. The tour took them through the beating heart of the company. They visited the trading floor, a chaotic sea of screens and shouting traders moving millions of dollars in seconds. They visited the marketing department and finally the executive boardroom on the 81st floor. Throughout the tour, Jessica tried to recover her dignity by acting like an expert. "You see," Jessica explained loudly to Alex, blocking his view of the trading screens, "this is all about buying low and selling high. It's actually really simple if you grow up with money. It's a mindset." She turned to Emily, who was looking at a scrolling ticker of stock prices. "Don't hurt your brain, Emily," Jessica sneered. "I know this is confusing for you. In your world, finance probably just means counting coupons at the grocery store. You wouldn't understand big money." Emily didn't look away from the screen. "Actually," she said quietly, mostly to Alex, "the volume on that tech merger is unusually high for Q4. It suggests a hostile takeover attempt, which means their liquidity is about to drop. It's not about buying low, it's about leveraging debt." Alex stared at her, impressed. "How do you know that?" "I read," Emily said simply. Jessica, hearing this, laughed loudly. "Leveraging debt? Did you hear that on a TV show? God, you try so hard to sound smart. Stick to cleaning floors, Emily. Leave the finance to the people who actually own the buildings." The tour concluded in the grand auditorium on the 90th floor. It was a magnificent space, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the entire city. The students took their seats in the plush velvet rows. Mr. Sterling stood at the podium on the stage. "Thank you for visiting," Sterling began. "Harrington Global believes in investing in the future. Today, we have a special announcement. We are launching the Harrington Future Leaders Scholarship. And to announce it and to take your questions, the chairman has asked a representative to speak to you." Jessica sat up straight, whispering to Chloe, "Bet it's the vice president. Maybe I can give him my dad's card." "However," Sterling continued, his eyes scanning the room and landing on the back row, "the chairman has decided that today is a good day for introductions. The representative speaking to you is not just an employee, she is the future of this company." The heavy double doors at the back of the stage, the ones marked Executive Access Only, swung open. The room went silent. A figure stepped out. It wasn't an old man in a grey suit. It wasn't a middle-aged executive. It was a young woman. She was no longer wearing the grey sweater and jeans. In the 20 minutes since the group had entered the auditorium, Emily had slipped away to her private office suite. She was now wearing a razor-sharp, custom-tailored navy blue power suit by Tom Ford. Her hair, usually messy, was slicked back into a high, severe ponytail that accentuated her cheekbones. She wore 4-inch stiletto heels that clicked against the stage floor with a rhythm that sounded like gunshots. She radiated terrifying, absolute power. Emily walked to the center of the stage and stood behind the podium. She placed her hands on the wood and looked out at the stunned audience of her classmates. For 10 seconds, nobody moved. The students were paralyzed with confusion. Then Jessica van der Woodsen stood up. She was trembling with rage. Her brain couldn't process what she was seeing. In her mind, Emily had sneaked backstage and was playing a prank. "You crazy psychopath!" Jessica screamed, her voice echoing in the silent hall. "Get down from there! Have you lost your mind? That is the chairman's podium! Security! Someone call security! She's trespassing!" Jessica pointed a shaking finger at Emily. "You are going to get arrested, you trash. Do you think putting on a suit makes you one of them? Get off the stage before you embarrass us all." Emily didn't flinch. She didn't yell back. She simply leaned toward the microphone. "Mr. Sterling?" Emily said, her voice amplified, calm and commanding. Mr. Sterling stepped forward, looking furious. Not at Emily, but at Jessica. He glared at the girl standing in the audience. "Sit down, Miss van der Woodsen," Sterling barked, his voice booming like thunder. "You will show respect." "But she's—" Jessica stammered. "Silence!" Sterling roared. He turned to the audience, gestured respectfully toward Emily, and delivered the words that shattered Jessica's reality forever. "Ladies and gentlemen, faculty of St. Augustine," Sterling announced. "It is my distinct honor to introduce you to the owner of this building, the majority shareholder of our stock, and the sole heiress to the empire." He paused for effect. "Please give a warm welcome to Miss Emily Harrington." The silence that followed Mr. Sterling's introduction was not merely the absence of sound. It was a physical force, a vacuum that sucked the oxygen out of the grand auditorium. 300 people sat frozen, their lungs refusing to draw breath, their eyes wide with a shock so profound it bordered on physical pain. Miss Emily Harrington. The name hung in the air, vibrating against the glass walls that overlooked the empire she inherited. For Jessica van der Woodsen, standing in the aisle with her arms still outstretched in accusation, the world did not just stop. It shattered. Her brain, wired for a reality where she was the queen and Emily was the pauper, suffered a catastrophic failure. She stared at the girl on stage, the girl she had tripped in the cafeteria, the girl whose dress she had destroyed, the girl she had called trash. But the girl on stage was not trash. She was a titan. Standing behind the podium, Emily looked out at the sea of faces. She saw the shock in Alex's eyes, the fear in her teachers' faces, and the absolute crushing horror in Jessica's. For a moment, Emily didn't feel triumph. She felt a profound, heavy sadness. This was the moment she had prepared for, the moment of justice. Yet it brought her no joy to see how easily people's perceptions shattered when money entered the equation. Emily adjusted the microphone. The sharp tap-tap echoed through the room like a gavel striking a judge's bench. "Thank you, Mr. Sterling," Emily said. Her voice was unrecognizable to her classmates. Gone was the soft-spoken, apologetic tone of the girl who rode a bicycle. In its place was a voice tempered by boardrooms and billion-dollar decisions. Calm, resonant, and terrifyingly composed. She stepped out from behind the podium, walking to the edge of the stage. Her navy suit absorbed the harsh stage lights, making her look like a silhouette of justice. "Welcome to Harrington Global," Emily began, her blue eyes locking onto Jessica. "For 4 generations, my family has built this city. We built the steel skeletons of the skyscrapers you live in. We underwrote the banks that hold your parents' savings. We funded the hospitals where you were born." She paused, letting the weight of her legacy press down on them. "When I decided to attend St. Augustine anonymously," Emily continued, her voice lowering to a conversational, almost intimate volume, "I was looking for something that money cannot buy. I was looking for character. I wanted to know who you were when you thought no one powerful was watching. I wanted to see how you treated the invisible people." Emily walked slowly across the stage, her heels clicking rhythmically. "I found my answer, and frankly, I am heartbroken." Jessica, still standing, began to tremble. It started in her hands and spread to her knees. "No," she whispered, her voice a dry rattle. "This is a lie. It's a trick." "It is no trick, Jessica," Emily said softly. "But it is a tragedy." Emily turned back to the podium and picked up a sleek black remote control. At Harrington Global, we operate on a core philosophy. Integrity is our currency. We do not partner with liabilities. We do not invest in cruelty. And recently, I realized that we have been funding a liability. She pressed a button. Behind her, the massive cinema-sized screen flickered to life. The resolution was crystal clear. A collective gasp, sounding like a sudden gust of wind, ripped through the audience. It was security footage. The timestamp was from 3 weeks ago. The setting, the drama department locker room. The video played in agonizing high definition. It showed Jessica, Chloe, and Madison breaking into the locker. It captured the audio perfectly. The cruel giggles, the sound of the zipper opening. It showed Jessica pulling out the bottle of red nail polish. On the screen, the Jessica of the past sneered, "Let's give it a splash of color. She wants to stand out? Now she knows her place." The audience watched in horrified fascination as the red polish was poured over the white Dior gown, ruining a piece of art worth more than a luxury car. The screen froze on the final frame. Jessica's face twisted in a mask of pure, unadulterated malice, holding the shears. In the auditorium, the real Jessica collapsed. Her legs simply gave out, and she fell into her seat, burying her face in her hands. The shame was absolute. It was a physical heat that radiated off her, making the students around her recoil, scooting their chairs away as if she were contagious. "That," Jessica sobbed, her voice thin and hysterical. "That's private. You can't show that." "St. Augustine is a private institution," Emily replied, her voice cold as steel. "Harrington Global pays for the security system. The servers belong to me, and the property you destroyed, that belonged to me." Emily placed the remote down. The room was deathly quiet. "However," Emily said, addressing the room at large, "this is not just about a dress. A dress can be replaced. This is about risk management." She looked directly at Mr. Sterling. "Mr. Sterling, what is the status of our current liquidity injection into Vanderwoodson Real Estate?" Sterling stepped up to the mic, his face impassive. "We currently underwrite 80% of their operational debt, Miss Harrington. We also hold the mortgage on their commercial developments in Midtown." "Terminate it," Emily commanded. The two words hung in the air like a guillotine blade. "Effective immediately," Emily said, her voice ringing with finality. "Invoke the moral clause in the contract. Harrington Global is severing all ties with the Vanderwoodson family. We are pulling the funding for the Midtown project and calling in the loans. We cannot trust our capital with a family that raises children to lack basic human decency. The reputational risk is simply too high." "Understood, Chairwoman," Sterling nodded. "I will notify the legal team." At that exact moment, in the deafening silence of the room, a sound cut through the air. Psst, psst, psst. It was Jessica's phone. It had fallen to the floor near her feet. The screen lit up, bright and urgent in the dim room. Through her tears, Jessica looked down. The message notification was visible to everyone in the row behind her. From DADDY. "Jessica, what did you do?" "The bank just called. They're pulling everything. The stock is in free fall. They're foreclosing on the penthouse. It's over. We are ruined. A wail, a sound of pure, primal despair, tore from Jessica's throat. It wasn't the cry of a bully. It was the cry of a child who realized she had just burned her own house down. She curled into herself, sobbing uncontrollably, her shoulders shaking with the violence of her grief. For a moment, Emily looked down at her. She didn't feel the rush of victory she had expected. She just felt tired. She felt the weight of the power she held, and how destructive it could be. "Mr. Sterling," Emily said quietly, "please have security escort Miss Vander Woodson out. She has a family emergency to attend to. Ensure she gets home safely." Two security guards stepped forward. They weren't rough. They helped the sobbing girl to her feet. Jessica didn't fight. She was broken. As she was led out of the auditorium, walking the long aisle of shame, not a single person reached out to her. Her friends, Chloe and Madison, stared straight ahead, terrified that if they moved, they would be next. The heavy doors closed behind her with a final somber thud. Emily stood alone on the stage. She took a deep breath, letting the mask of the corporate shark slip away, revealing the 18-year-old girl beneath. She looked exhausted. She looked at Alex, who was sitting in the third row, staring at her, not with fear, but with a profound, dawning understanding. "I'm sorry," Emily said to the room, her voice soft and genuine. "I didn't want my time at St. Augustine to end like this. I just wanted to be Emily." She stepped back from the podium. "Mr. Sterling will handle the rest of the Q&A. Thank you." And with that, Emily Harrington walked off the stage, leaving the stunned silence of the auditorium behind her. Epilogue. 3 months later. Spring had finally arrived in New York City, banishing the grey slush of winter and replacing it with the vibrant, hopeful greens of Central Park. The magnolia trees were in full bloom, dropping pink petals like confetti onto the winding paths. The scandal at St. Augustine had been the fuel of Upper East Side gossip for weeks, but like all storms, it had eventually passed. The Vander Woodson empire had collapsed spectacularly. The family had filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, their assets seized by creditors. Rumor had it they had moved to a small rental in New Jersey, and Jessica was attending a public high school where nobody knew her name. But on this sunny Saturday afternoon, Emily Harrington wasn't thinking about business, revenge, or stock prices. She wasn't wearing a power suit, and she wasn't surrounded by security guards. She was sitting on a weathered wooden bench near the Bethesda fountain, wearing a simple pair of jeans, white sneakers, and a soft, oversized sweater. Beside her sat Alex Miller, a wail, a sound of pure, primal despair, tore from Jessica's throat. It wasn't the cry of a bully, it was the cry of a child who realized she had just burned her own house down. She curled into herself, sobbing uncontrollably, her shoulders shaking with the violence of her grief. For a moment, Emily looked down at her. She didn't feel the rush of victory she had expected. She just felt tired. She felt the weight of the power she held, and how destructive it could be. "Mr. Sterling," Emily said quietly, "please have security escort Miss Vander Woodson out. She has a family emergency to attend to. Ensure she gets home safely." Two security guards stepped forward. They weren't rough. They helped the sobbing girl to her feet. Jessica didn't fight. She was broken. As she was led out of the auditorium, walking the long aisle of shame, not a single person reached out to her. Her friends, Chloe and Madison, stared straight ahead, terrified that if they moved, they would be next. The heavy doors closed behind her with a final, somber thud. Emily stood alone on the stage. She took a deep breath, letting the mask of the corporate shark slip away, revealing the 18-year-old girl beneath. She looked exhausted. She looked at Alex, who was sitting in the third row, staring at her not with fear, but with a profound, dawning understanding. "I'm sorry," Emily said to the room, her voice soft and genuine. "I didn't want my time at St. Augustine to end like this. I just wanted to be Emily." She stepped back from the podium. Mr. Sterling will handle the rest of the Q&A. Thank you." And with that, Emily Harrington walked off the stage, leaving the stunned silence of the auditorium behind her. Epilogue. 3 months later. Spring had finally arrived in New York City, banishing the grey slush of winter and replacing it with the vibrant, hopeful greens of Central Park. The magnolia trees were in full bloom, dropping pink petals like confetti onto the winding paths. The scandal at St. Augustine had been the fuel of Upper East Side gossip for weeks, but like all storms, it had eventually passed. The Van der Woodsen empire had collapsed spectacularly. The family had filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, their assets seized by creditors. Rumor had it they had moved to a small rental in New Jersey, and Jessica was attending a public high school where nobody knew her name. But on this sunny Saturday afternoon, Emily Harrington wasn't thinking about business, revenge, or stock prices. She wasn't wearing a power suit, and she wasn't surrounded by security guards. She was sitting on a weathered wooden bench near the Bethesda fountain, wearing a simple pair of jeans, white sneakers, and a soft, oversized sweater. Beside her sat Alex Miller. They were sharing a cheap, $5 vanilla soft serve cone from a street vendor. The ice cream was melting faster than they could eat it, dripping onto their fingers. Alex took a bite of the cone, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, and looked out across the lake. He shook his head, a small, disbelief-filled laugh escaping his lips. "I still can't wrap my head around it sometimes," he said softly. "Around what?" Emily asked, licking a drop of vanilla from her thumb. Alex gestured toward the skyline, where the jagged silhouette of the Harrington Tower pierced the blue sky in the distance. "That," he said. "You own half this city, Em. You could be eating gold-flaked sundaes at the Baccarat Hotel right now. You could be on a yacht in the Mediterranean. But here you are, sitting on a dirty park bench, fighting me for the last bite of a cheap ice cream cone." Emily smiled, but her eyes were thoughtful. She leaned her head onto his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him. "The gold sundaes taste metallic," she joked softly. Then, her voice turned serious. "Besides, I told you from the beginning, Alex. Do you remember?" "Told me what?" "That I wanted something real," Emily said. She watched a young couple walking their dog, oblivious to who she was. "That tower, the money, the board meetings, that's my responsibility. It's my legacy, and I will honor it. But it's not me." She turned her face up to look at him. The sunlight filtered through the leaves, dappling her face with light and shadow. Without the glasses, without the hoodie, and without the corporate armor, she looked open, vulnerable. "When I'm in that building, I'm the chairwoman," she whispered. "I have to be cold, I have to be sharp, but with you, I don't have to be the heiress, I don't have to be the boss. I can just be Emily, the girl who likes old books, bad pizza, and you." Alex looked at her. He didn't see the billions of dollars. He didn't see the empire. He saw the girl who had sat with him in the back of the library, debating economics while hiding in a grey hoodie. He reached out and gently brushed a stray lock of hair behind her ear. "Well," Alex said, his voice thick with emotion. "For the record, Emily, the girl who likes bad pizza, is my favorite person in the world." Emily's heart swelled, filling the empty spaces that the money could never touch. She closed the distance between them, and as they kissed, the noise of the city faded away. High above, the skyscrapers of Manhattan gleamed with cold indifference, monuments to power and ambition. But down here, on a park bench covered in cherry blossom petals, Emily Harrington had found the one thing her grandfather's fortune could never buy. She had found the truth, and it tasted sweeter than any revenge.